Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic, and I'm a host to these Tectonic Conversations, a series of live webcasts that we've been producing to bring to you conversations with interesting, impactful people who are Canadian technology leaders, technology entrepreneurs, founders of Canadian tech companies, and Canadian technology executives, talking about things that interest tech curious audiences. And today I'm absolutely thrilled. I have a very, very special guest, a colleague and a friend, Jeff Adamson. Jeff, thank you very much for finding time to be with me today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Dalibor. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So Jeff is a legend of Canadian tech entrepreneurship. Um, Originally from Saskatoon, we're going to hear the whole story, of course, but very, very sort of made his name first through competitive wrestling, where he represented Canada internationally, but then as a co-founder of SkipTheDishes, and now, as of a few years ago, also a co-founder of Neo Financial, a fintech company that is absolutely on fire, the highest growth company in Canada last year. Jeff, I'm very curious to hear the story, of course. And for the audience members, this session is going live today on Monday, this May 26th. So if anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to use the Q&A function of this Zoom platform and let's submit questions to Jeff. So with that, Jeff, I typically do not like to provide long introductions. I prefer to hear people actually tell their story. So if you don't mind, why don't we start there? If you don't mind sharing how you sort of navigated your life and career to now be where you're at.
Well, yeah, and I want to correct you, Dalibor, because I definitely am not a legend yet. I'm working hard on it. And but Yeah, I mean I've been working in tech startups for the last decade or so, but I'd say that I'm kind of a bit of an outsider that got into technology. I grew up in Saskatchewan, just outside Saskatoon, and for my whole life, my focus was on sports. That was really kind of like my passion. I didn't pick the most glamorous sport. I played hockey. I kept the bench really warm in football, and you can ask any of the high school football coaches about that. But the sport that I really fell in love with was wrestling, and there was just something about it that it combined so many different problems to solve.
Hmm.
You need to have the the speed of a sprinter, the endurance of a long distance athlete to be able to compete all day, but then you also need to have the strength of a power lifter to lift, a full grown man off the
Yeah.
ground against their will. And then the other piece of it was the mental agility to be able to figure out 600 or so odd named techniques and then all these different variations of them. And then
Hmm.
all the while you're learning how to do these things, you also need to make weight. So there's a real resilience component to it, to the training that comes through in the form of weight loss to make your weight class. So while you're training, you're actually sometimes losing 20 or 30 pounds to get down to your weight class.
Wow.
It's also this really crazy international sport too, where you'll have 180 countries send athletes to the World Championships each year. And so it was just, for me, growing up in Saskatchewan, I just fell in love with the so many different problems to solve, so many interesting things to learn, and the idea that might be able to go and see the world if I was able to make the national team. And I was fortunate enough when I was 16 to make my first national team, and then kind of made them consecutively into my 20s. Um, and really got a chance to travel around, compete, see how things are being done in other countries, meet a ton of people, learn about a lot of different cultures. And the cool thing about when you have a sport or even if you're in business or you go somewhere and you're in a totally different culture, but you're brought together for a common reason or common purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with wrestling, like no matter what country you're from, and I suspect it's similar in other sports too, but you really may not speak the same language. You may have grown up in totally different
Yeah.
experiences, but you have that, you know that you understand a lot of the same things
Yeah.
because you've
There's a
been
common thread.
through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, you have that common thread with them. And so that was my passion. And it was shortly after the 2012 Olympic Games. I came back to Canada and I was trying to think of, what to do. And I think I had learned a lot about failure. I'd learned a lot about self-confidence and kind of what do I want to make of my life, and this idea that if I wasn't pursuing this dream of being an Olympic champion, then well, what was the thing I was going to pursue? And I really wanted to do something that was going to enable me to be able to capitalize on a lot of this character capital that I had built up from a life of being, a high performance athlete. And I was trying to figure out like where can I apply this?
Yeah.
And I really struggled in kind of the traditional 9 to 5 job. I just found that I was antsy. I was unsettled.
Mm.
I
Mm.
something about leaving at 5 o'clock when the job wasn't done just didn't seem right. It just seemed like odd to me that we would kind of like, just leave and go
Yeah.
home
Yeah.
and
Leave mid, yeah, mid sentence, 5 o'clock. Ding ding. Let's go home. Right. Yeah.
yeah, and this idea that like, how badly do we all want to win here? Like, are we here to win or are we here to collect a paycheck? And
Yeah.
I just have been always wired around trying to play to win, and have fun doing it. And so I think there's certain companies that have that culture, but I hadn't really been in that intense winning environment as a professional. And so when the idea of doing a tech company and a
Mm.
tech startup kind of revealed itself, um, it sounded really, really cool, if I'm being honest. The funny thing though, Dalibor, is that when my friends approached me and they said, "Hey, do you want to do a tech startup?" I literally didn't know what a startup was.
Yeah.
I,
Wow.
I actually asked them what do you like what do you mean by a
What do you
startup? This
mean?
is
Yeah.
this is 2012, so this is kind of before the startup culture that you see now.
Yes.
Um, but I felt like it would have given me the idea of working in a tech company was going to be able to give me this outlet for my competitive nature
Yes.
and and really an opportunity to learn and be around great people, people who I like being with, people who I like working hard with. Um, and the idea of doing, a tech company, the idea of Skip the Dishes, it wasn't like we were passionate about food delivery, but what we were passionate about was this idea of putting the prairies on the map. That was
Mm.
one thing that we had a bit of a chip on our shoulder for
Yeah. Yeah.
Dalibor. And so this idea of being able to build a company that could put the prairies on the map, the company that we could be proud of, and a company more than anything that could give high performing, ambitious, hardworking, kind, humble people in the prairies a real place that they can have that outlet, they can have a high performance job. They don't need to go to Silicon Valley to do that.
Yeah.
We wanted to create that opportunity here and to kind of raise the stakes even higher. We kind of thought, well, 100 years from now, what is going to be the reason why people call the prairies home?
Mm.
Is it obviously we have the family, we have our culture, but you need to have jobs that are evolving with
Yeah.
a changing world.
Yeah.
And we're still and I'm not saying this is a bad thing. This is definitely not a strike at all. I think we've got an incredible economy in the prairies, but it is still more focused on value extraction than value creation.
Yeah.
And that's just a function of how the prairies kind of were developed.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah.
But if we think about 100 years out, how do we ensure that the prairies are set up in a way that we have these incredible information age jobs, knowledge economy jobs, where we have headquarters of this new wave that's happening? How do we headquarter and have the locuses of power for those companies in the prairies? And then that way we're the ones making the decisions, not the ones on the receiving ends of the decisions. Like we
Yeah.
are in oil and gas. Like oil and gas is a great example. Like we are a global, you know,
Powerhouse. Yeah. Power.
powerhouse in energy. And I'd love to see that happen in technology. And so that was kind of this idea that got us really excited and brought us all together to start our first company, which was Skip the Dishes.
Yeah. And I can, as you started with your sort of professional sports, well, not professional sports career, it is evident you're a competitor, right? You have a competitive streak with you. Absolutely makes complete sense that you actually found a startup tech company as a channel for that competitive streak, right? So, so can you tell us a little bit when you now reflect, skip the dishes? What were the biggest sort of lessons that you've learned through that experience, and then how did it go from skip the dishes, the delivery service, into
Mhm.
solving financial services for Canadians?
Oh man, I mean, there's one thing to understand, Dalibor, is before Skip. I mean, my day job was first I was a research scientist, and so I was doing lab research, genetic engineering of plants, and then I moved into kind of consulting, business development. But I didn't like my education is I have an agriculture degree, specializing in biotechnology. Like I don't have any formal business training, and so for me, it was just this like, I mean, it was learning all the time. Like
Wow.
I didn't know the first thing about a company, let alone to start one. And to me, that was just the part of the draw, though, was
Yeah.
like I'm going to throw myself right in. I'm going to be accountable to delivering growth because if I don't, then I basically am out of a job. Like I have to rely on myself and the team, but we have to will this thing into reality. And so I think the first thing was really it was learning just the business fundamentals. That was one of the basics of just like, okay, like how do we need to run a business, cash flow, balance sheet,
Yeah.
hiring, um, leading teams, business planning, strategy,
Yeah.
like all the basic fundamentals. But then I think that those are the table stakes. I think more than that, a couple of things was just how hard it was. Like I didn't understand that. I kind of thought like, well, there's so many companies around it must be pretty darn easy to run them. Well, it definitely wasn't. And the sheer, hopelessness that comes with running a business. There's times where you don't know if you're going to make payroll. There's times where you have a huge deal that goes south.
Yeah.
There's times where you have key employee where, their life changes and they leave the business.
Yeah.
And then you're left kind of there having to figure it out. And so that kind of deep thinking that has to go into problem solving and just refusing to quit, I think was something that I kind of learned how to apply in a business environment. Um, I think the other thing was I had never really witnessed firsthand the application of technology and how it can really affect
Mm.
scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the example I'll give you, Delabor, is when we were building Skip. I remember we had in the early days, like you're talking like in the dozens of orders a day. And some of those orders we're placing ourselves just to like, make the restaurants think that we're bigger than we actually are. Like we're just like maxing out our credit card.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
like, oh, this restaurant hasn't got an order in like a month. We need to give them one order. We have to eat lunch that day. We're just going to order ourselves. But like I remember one day it was a particularly busy day and it rained. And when it rains, order volume also just spikes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we did 1,000 orders that day, and I remember literally like I felt like the keyboards were like smoking. Like
Yeah.
we had the people working in logistics, routing the couriers and trying to figure out where to go. Like there was like grown men crying, a few
Yeah.
people walked off the job. It was complete chaos. And then I remember at the end of it, like the room, like the people were dripping sweat almost. It was so intense.
Wow.
And I remember thinking like, oh my God, we literally just had to throw everything we had just to break 1,000 orders a day.
Yeah.
And then I remember my co-founder, Chris, he kind of came over to me and kind of patted me on the back and he was like, just wait until we do 100,000 orders a day.
Yeah.
And like I think
Oh yeah.
he took my soul, I think, at that moment because I just couldn't fathom how we could even do 1,001 orders.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And and then literally sure enough, when I left Skip, we were routinely doing million order months, no problem. You
Million
know,
orders a month.
Yeah, easily. Like we did that early. When I left, we were probably doing like 3 or 4 million a month. So and that and no one's even breaking a sweat. Like the room is quiet. People have their feet up.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it had everything to do with just applying just basic technology that we had just layered on over and on, refined it over and over again, and taken these incredibly smart people from Winnipeg and Saskatoon and just basically like they had worked the problem,
yeah.
and eventually day in, day out, it just got better and better and better to the point where you're not breaking a sweat to do over 1 million.
You have actually proven that in the prairies, one can actually organize and create a world-class modern technology organization, right?
Well,
you've proven that you've proven it's possible.
well, and the thing, Delabore, is that there's this, and like I remember as a kid, I used to get a little nervous competing against wrestlers from Ontario
Hmm.
because I remember thinking, how is it possible that I come from a town of like 100 people that I'm going to be able to beat some stud from Toronto?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like that, it's just not fair. Like that city is thousands and thousands of times bigger than where I, and all the opportunities are totally different too.
yeah.
But I think that
And the selection
what's
of talent, of course, the talent pool, right?
100%. So, but then the funny thing is that once you kind of do, when you enter the arena enough times, then you kind of realize that we're all kind of made out of the same stuff.
Yeah,
And, but then it comes down to who's hungrier, who has that will to win, and who's curious. And in business, is exactly the same. Like we took people who were stocking bookshelves at Chapters,
hmm,
gave them an opportunity, and before you know it, they're world-class product managers. They're now
mm,
being like some of the people who worked on the early algorithms at Skip are, could consult for tens of thousands of dollars an hour. Like these people are in high demand globally now. And I think that just goes to show you that, there's incredible people here and they just need a canvas to paint onto. And that's why I'm so excited about entrepreneurship in the prairies is that
yeah.
it's like guys, like they're here, they want to be here, they want to stay here. We just got to give them that opportunity, and that's what gets me fired up.
That's fantastic, fantastic. So skip the dishes broke through, and it became, of course, what it is still, right? Then you guys exit Skip, like this is your exit, and instead of buying an island and living off, you decide to shake the financial services in Canada. So can you maybe give us a little bit of a like where this idea for Neo came from? What is the problem that you were compelled to solve, and then what has happened then?
Yeah, when we sold the business, you do a bit of soul searching, I think, anytime you go through a transition. And, for me, it was, wrestling and then skip. And it was kind of like, hey, what's the next thing? And I think I talked to a lot of people, and I think in Canada, we have a habit of like saying, hey, this is kind of good enough. Like I've done enough.
Mm, mhm,
Um,
mhm,
it's not a universal rule, but I think a lot of the entrepreneurs, it's so hard that by the time they finish, if they have a successful exit in one company, they're just like, I'm not signing up for that again. Like I'm not gonna, like it's very difficult. And certainly that was had crossed my mind. But to me, the idea that, being kind of in my early 30s and not kind of having a fire and not really having a purpose was far scarier to me than than starting up another business.
oh yeah.
And the job just didn't seem done to me in terms of putting the prairies on the map. I think Skip, is a wonderful business, but like we need 100 Skips. We need 100 unicorns in order to really, what I would say that the job is done. And so then it came down to kind of just what's the problem that you keep thinking about, and
Hmm.
it kind of bugs you that no one's solved it. And I remember I was in Europe. We actually expanded Skip into Europe, and I got kind of my first exposure to what banking is like in other countries.
Hmm.
And I was shocked at just how user friendly the apps were. And it kind of made me feel like the ones I had been using my whole life, the banking apps, were almost like made for dial-up internet era. And so when I got
Mm.
back home, I thought, well, maybe the app I have, because I've been with the same bank for so long, like many of us. So I thought, hey, maybe I'm going to go and just see, maybe the grass is greener. Maybe just my app is old-fashioned. So I went online, just kind of a simple query like open a new bank account near me,
Yeah.
and click on the first website, go online, and I'm kind of like, after 5 minutes of searching, I realized like you can't open an account online.
Yeah.
And again, this is 2019, um, so I'm like, okay, well, I basically click on the button that says open an account. It says go to your nearest branch. Here's the nearest branch. So I go drive, get in my car, go to the branch. I wait in line, get to the front, and then they say to me that I had to book an appointment to open an account. So then I go back home, book an appointment that for the next week, come back in, and then they say, well, listen, in order to complete your account, you have to bring a power bill in and prove your like your
Residency.
address and your
Yeah.
residency, all this stuff. And so then I went back home and I said, you know what, just screw this. I'm gonna just close my account. Like, this experiment is too much work. And then I went to close my account. It says, go, you have to visit your branch manager to close your account.
Yeah, it's like a
And
gym membership.
yes, and I just shocked that, like, for companies that are so critical to just running your
Yeah.
everyday life and so critical to our economy, for such big consumer brands to not really have made this process seamless, to me, it was kind of a sign that there's a lot of opportunity in financial services. And it got really exciting to me because, financial services is really the kind of lubrication of the gears of the economy.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And ours had really prioritized, our system, our banking system had really prioritized stability at the cost of innovation for decades and
Yeah.
decades. And it's kind of left us with a system that is still kind of built for the dial-up internet era or earlier. It's still very much, racks and servers. It's not made for the cloud. It's not made for AI.
Yep.
Um, and I think that's a bit of a shame because it's so important to us. It infects our economy so much. So it felt like there was a huge opportunity and a big opportunity to build an ecosystem business where, if we can become successful, we can start helping people in, for example, like SMB lending. What if we could increase liquidity to people who are starting up a company for the first time?
Mhm.
So for us, starting up in the consumer side, it's something that we're familiar with, having built consumer business in the past with
Yeah.
Skip. But the vision is really to build an ecosystem of financial services where,
Mhm.
this can be a company that other companies will be able to build off of.
Mm. So the growth has been spectacular. I believe I'm correct in stating that you guys were at the top of all the growth companies in Canada last year, right?
That's correct. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess your previous employer, Deloitte, does the
Does that
awards every
assessment,
year.
yeah. So, so Jeff, I'd love to get your view on the opportunity for Neo Financial going forward. Like, where do you feel this is heading? You opened a little bit of a door. You said this will be, of course, for personal consumers. It's a consumer service, but you also see it as a platform. Where do you like? What's the ultimate end game?
Yeah. So for the first few years, the foundation to really get to the end game, and for us, it's really like our mission is to make banking user friendly. I mean, that's very, very simple way of putting it. We just want to make banking as easy as all the other apps that you use, whether that's like a Spotify, Netflix. Like, where's the easy button for banking?
Yeah, yeah.
How do we just get out of the way of consumers? But the challenge in doing that, Dalibor, is that all of the banks today are running on almost identical technology stacks.
Hmm.
They use very similar technology. They use a lot of the same vendors, and those vendors are actually the incumbents of their industries too. So you have incumbents using incumbents. So there's
Hmm.
very little very little innovation because it's very difficult to change what they have. It's very
Yeah, yeah,
expensive, it's very risky. And so the incentive is just to kind of maintain what they have. And so if we want to really build a very user-friendly banking ecosystem, the fundamental one of the principles is that we cannot be dependent on the same technology. And in Canada, there's very little infrastructure for building fintechs in Canada.
yeah.
And so we had to make the very, technically challenging problem to solve, which was building our own tech stack from scratch. So
Wow.
the first thing that we had to do was build our own banking core. We had to build our own in-house cloud-based ledger. Then we had to actually become a self-processor as well. So I think we're the only self-processing issuer in Canada for different payment products like credit cards or prepaid cards. And then we also became a direct issuer with MasterCard and allow
Yeah.
us to actually operate on MasterCard Cloud. So that full bespoke stack now gives us the freedom to be able to build in a way that we want. And so that enables us to do things, for example, like mixed credit is something that interesting that we're working on right now. So this is the idea that you can start extending greater amounts of credit to people by mixing it with a certain level of security.
Hmm.
And so for people, like a lot of people in Canada actually struggle to access credit because our existing banks in Canada are so risk averse.
Hmm.
So as a result, it creates a huge portion of the population that actually can't get access to the credit that they need. The other example would be on how do you price out the risk? So all the banks today price out risk in the form of a interest rate that you pay on a credit card,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's kind of a one size fits all approach.
Hmm.
Whereas by building our own tech stack, we're able to take risk-based pricing approach where we can appropriately price out the risk that each customer carries so that, it's more personalized to each customer's own, risk profile.
Unique circumstance. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The other thing that gets me excited is this idea of private banking for the masses.
Hmm.
And I think it's even more possible now. Even 2 years ago, when I was thinking about this, it was kind of a lot less likely. But with the advent of AI,
Yeah.
I think it's going to create a world where the private banking experience, which is really only available to 0.001% of the population,
Yeah.
and that is essentially, and a lot of people don't even know, I had no idea what it was, but essentially it's you can just call up a banker and they will take care of whatever you need done banking wise.
Yeah.
There's no waiting in lines, there's no waiting on hold. It's a purely like white glove concierge service. I think that is going to be possible in a very short time frame with agentic AI. I think we're going to get to there'll be phases as we get there, but
Yeah.
the first phase will be like, you know, hey, can you tell me how much I've spent on takeout lunches in the last couple of weeks? Budgeting focused, just
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
search and provide the information. But then I think we're going to get to a point where we can literally hand the keys over to our financial lives to an agentic agent
Hmm.
with guardrails.
Yeah.
So you could literally tell it, hey, I want you to help me save $1,000. I want you to block transactions. I want you to tell me the things I should be cutting. I want you to handle my payments for me. Um, and it's going to be able to go and do that for you. It's going to be able to act on your behalf. Now, there's a lot of things to solve in that, but I think we're that's already in sight right now.
This is what you're painting is actually a phenomenal phenomenal picture. It's um, so this is going to be mass customization where you are essentially going to interact with your bank as your financial advisor, as your financial health builder, as the broker of all of your transactions, and hyper intelligent polymath next to you on finance, right?
Exactly. Yep.
You have a polymath next to you in finance, and at some point you should be able to come and say, "Look, have a look at my whole picture, everything, my history, everything, and then let's work together to put in a plan that I can retire in 5 years, seven
Yeah.
years, 10 years, right?"
Yeah.
That is. that there is world like life changing, quite frankly.
Well, and the exciting thing, Dalibor, is like financial literacy is a huge, huge problem. Like we partner up with Junior Achievement Canada
Hmm.
to provide embedded financial products into their financial literacy learning modules.
Yeah,
And they've been working on this problem in Canada, but it is a vast problem. I mean, you look at, the level of debt that people carry. If you look at people's level of understanding of how finance works is relatively low. I don't think our education system does enough
yeah,
to
no,
really help
100%, I
people
agree.
in this
Yeah,
in this regard. And so this idea though that we actually may be accidentally solving it. Like it's almost how like in I think I heard in Africa they're like not even building telephone lines because
that's
they're
right.
just everyone's on mobile now.
Yeah,
Um, so I think like being able to basically say we're going to be able to give everyone the ability to like have a world class, you know, polymath, budgeter, financial literacy expert
yeah,
who's paired up with them now.
yeah,
And it's like, okay, I guess like we actually never needed to teach anyone that anyways, because it's going to be able to literally hold their hand. Now, I think there's still a level that will need to be done. I don't think we'll solve it entirely, but I think it opens that door to democratize financial literacy for people so they can avoid making some of these costly mistakes that end up setting people back. And we can really just provide that available to everybody.
yeah. That would be life changing for everyone. Like that would be, I think that probably is the pot of gold at the end of this particular rainbow, especially as the whole society is going through this gigantic change. We are of course facing this reality where there's going to be probably less and less of, not probably, there'll be less and less of a traditional work. There will be, in my estimate, more and more people who are having multiple sources of income from different arrangements that now someone needs to orchestrate, coordinate, understand, plan, tax, advise you on,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Intelligent financial polymath in my pocket would be essential, actually. I think it'll become an essential service, quite frankly.
Yeah, the interesting thing will be, does it then just become more complex? Does it kind of like because the understanding will become greater,
Yeah.
will we then make it more complex
Mm.
as a result of that, and then it'll kind of negate some of the benefits. But in any of these situations, we had to build out the infrastructure so that because getting an incumbent legacy provider to be able to connect with this vision just it'll break.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so putting all of the products. So today we do everything from credit cards, prepaid debit, high interest savings, investments, and we're a mortgage lender as well. And we've taken this Apple ecosystem approach
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that the products work well together. They're all in the same tech stack. If you have multiple products, it doesn't feel like you're working with multiple different companies. It's connected, and the value props improve the more of them that you have together. Um, and so as we think about an AI world, I think we absolutely had to build this infrastructure if we wanted to be able to realize that vision. So it's super exciting. We're doing a ton of AI on the back end, but to me, I get really excited about the front end on the consumer experience.
And what you just described, the fact that you built your own stack from core banking onwards gives you absolutely flexibility to maneuver any way you choose. That like awesome. Congratulations. So Jeff, you mentioned multiple times, of course, throughout this conversation, your passion for, entrepreneurship and encouragement of people to lean in and start up a company and get the prairies on the map as a world center where cool tech things happen. Uh, but as we know, today, the moment we are in right now is an odd one, right? There is fear, there is hesitation, there is uncertainty. Things are coming at us from all different fields. I'd
Yep.
love to get your perspective. What would be your sort of perspective on how ought we think about the current moment?
Yeah, it's such an interesting paradox that we're in. It's a very interesting time because on one hand, and I mentioned this last week, was that it's never been easier to start a company. The barriers have never been lower. Like
Yeah,
you can have, there's going to be a solo multi-billion dollar company within my lifetime for sure. No
yeah.
question. Certainly now. Um, and you're already starting to see, like, I think I read that Telegram is a 30-person team and they have a billion users or something,
Yeah,
just wild.
yeah.
So you can get off the ground really easy with AWS, Shopify, OpenAI. You can get off the
Hmm.
ground really easily. But then it seems like it's never been easier to come up with a reason not to start a company and to basically say, hey, I'm just going to wait. It's a little bit, who knows what Donald Trump is going to tweet out with next week. Let's just kind of wait until things are more predictable. And so I think there's more and more people are waiting. And and I think it's a bit of a hangover from COVID too. I think COVID kind of just absolutely just depleted our risk battery. And
Hmm.
so now people are just kind of like, playing it safe. And I think that's a real big problem because, we need, like, I believe that entrepreneurs and small businesses, um, just basically private enterprise in general is so key to just pushing our economy forward. It's so key to a rising standard of living and creating abundance for everybody. And this is top of mind for me because actually last week a friend of mine sent me a report. It's called the Global Entrepreneurship Report, and in the
Yeah.
report, it actually goes through every single country in the world. It studies entrepreneurship. It's really, really high detail, and it comes out every couple of years. And in this report, it actually had Canada as number one in the world as citing fear of failure as a barrier to entrepreneurship.
Number one in the world,
Yeah,
inciting the fear of failure as a roadblock to entrepreneurship.
yeah, and I can relate to that too. Like I understand like how that feels like as a
Yeah,
combative athlete, like in wrestling, like you're one on one. It can be terrifying and paralyzing because if you fail, then everyone sees, and then
yeah,
then people are like, what are they going to think about you? And so, but the thing is that the other barriers like access to capital and regulatory, these are harder to solve. Fear of failure is more of a perception.
yeah.
It's a manufactured, and that means it's actually easy for us to fix that too, because we're actually, I think it was like third or fourth in terms of opportunities to start a company and ability to start a company. So we
Mhm.
have the opportunities, we have the ability, but we have this fear that we've put up, which is very understandable. And to me, the exciting part is, okay, well, if we can create a culture in Canada that celebrates risk taking, where we actually kind of are more uplifting towards one another, towards the people who are taking these risks. And I'm not talking about myself. It's more the people who are starting up for the first
Yeah,
time, or whatever like it could be, just like kind of just raising the ambition a little bit in terms of saying like, hey, maybe playing it safe looks like this. So so maybe let's amp it up. I'm going to go for something I think is a little bit outside
beyond.
of my reach, but
Yeah,
maybe I'll surprise myself.
yeah,
Maybe it's a job, whatever it is, but just push the envelope a little bit harder. And I think the exciting part is that Canada is already a pretty great place to live, and we're at like a 0% growth environment right now.
yeah.
And you can start to see the early signs of fighting over the pieces of the pie. In a Canada where we're growing at 4 or 5% a year,
Pie is
that's
bigger.
gr you're growing the whole pie,
Yes,
and that means we're not fighting over equalization payments. We're not talking about, you know, Alberta sovereignty, and we're that's an environment where there's new schools getting put up, there's new
yes,
hospitals, there's an abundance that's created, and it's fully within our ability to achieve it.
yeah.
So that's what I get really amped up about.
So really, the message here, we gotta get ourselves out of our own heads collectively, because we actually live in a country that is prosperous, abundant with resources, abundant with talented, highly educated people. Like we have all the ingredients. It's just now the question of us collectively choosing to encourage people to proceed and be there to support them and be there to celebrate them and be there to actually celebrate their when they fail, because You either succeed or you learn. That should be the attitude, right? And let's then
100%.
spread the lessons learned so that next iteration is going to be that much better.
Yeah, and listen, I have a lot of empathy for people who will say like, listen, I want to pursue my dreams. I want to start a company. I want to do a new venture, but like, here's the reasons why I can't. And a lot of times those are legitimate reasons. Like you know, it hasn't helped that we've gone through a cost of living crisis.
Yeah,
You know, it doesn't help that, you know, you're already taking on a ton of risk just to attempt to buy a home.
yeah,
So some people are again, I think they're just their risk battery is fully depleted, and I think on top of that, the culture side, I think
mm,
it adds another layer to that because no one wants to be seen as a failure. But I've got a ton of patience and a ton of time for the people who are getting after it, whether they succeed or fail. It doesn't, to me, I'm indifferent. Versus the people who are neither winning or losing. They're kind of staying fixed in place.
yeah,
They're not accountable to a deliverable.
yeah,
And I think that is kind of what maintains the status quo, which I don't think is going to lead us to a great place because
yeah,
a zero growth environment is going to increase the amount of fighting we have over
yeah,
pieces of the pie.
correct.
So I would love to, you know, contribute as much as I can to creating an environment where we're celebrating the people who are getting after it and taking risks. And again, if they don't succeed, I guarantee they're going to learn a ton, which is going to make their next thing that they do even more likely to succeed again.
Yeah. And I think that's what you're talking about is actually superbly important because I believe where everything is heading with automation, AI, robotics are coming. We see this. Like if you are peripherally plugged into what's happening out there,
Yeah,
it doesn't take a genius to, play forward this movie for 5, 10 years out.
yeah,
And we are going to be in a situation where human work will be replaced. There will not be jobs like we know them now.
yeah.
I believe people are going to be in the situation where there will that the many are going to be needing to be thinking and relying on their
Hmm.
personal curiosities, interests, and so on and so forth. So
Hmm.
I think that we are heading into this environment
Yeah.
where individual individual people will need to be much more active in figuring out how and where do they organize their work life and sources of income in
Hmm.
ways that are not traditional. Like
Hmm.
how do you see where we are heading and what is sort of the mid to long
Hmm.
term picture?
Yeah, it's gonna create a ton of it's gonna be a ton of change, and I think you're right that there are gonna be it could be a world of absolute abundance where developing an income through multiple different streams, you're building different AI agents to solve kind of niche problems, and there's an income streams associated with those. I think that it's going to there is a world where it creates a crisis of purpose,
Yes.
and I think that having a national identity, a national purpose, you know, what do we believe in as Canadians, I think is going to be very important. And how do we want to, I don't want to say direct, but like, what is the thing that kind of brings us all together? You know, where do we want to take this country? And then, but as you know, and ideally you have an alignment all the way down to the nuclear family,
Yeah.
and then all the way down to your individual contributions in the economy towards where we want to take the country. Um, but I do think, yeah, like this idea of like if you can kind of make money without having to work, you know, in the traditional sense,
Yeah.
what what keeps you happy? What keeps you motivated and hungry? And it's gonna be a brave new world. I certainly don't have the foggiest idea of what it's gonna look like. So everything I'm thinking about is purely, you know, speculation.
Yeah. 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 But I believe that we are heading into that environment, into that world where where traditional work that humans perform is not going to be needed. And
Yeah.
every organization is incentivized to actually automate its business. You just shared the version of that at Skip. Like how many people took to run 1,000 orders? Well, if you guys were not smart, clever to develop sophisticated technologies and algorithms and routing and sequence and so on and so forth, you will need thousands of people to route millions of orders, right? So that's a logical, normal, expected outcome. So the question that I am struggling with is how do we actually organize our society in a way that that you have a purpose that is intrinsically yours, that you are encouraged to act on that purpose, and ideally that your sources of income actually are linked to that purpose.
Yeah.
If we can make that shift, right? So that you're not working because you have to bring the bread to the table, but you are
Yeah.
working because it is truly your passion.
Yeah.
But the world of abundance around us, where goods and services have dropped in price, actually allow us to
Hmm.
make that life still affordable. And quite frankly, in that system,
Hmm.
organizations like Neo, I think actually are the broker of these lives for people. Like this is the I think the opportunity, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think the exciting thing about it is that, for us, building a financial services, fully digital, kind of end to end, fully, cloud, mobile, AI ready, I think is going to be well positioned in this kind of
Yes.
new world that is being created. Um, my question, and this is probably a longer discussion, but like, what are the forces that are going to be working against that world? And then how do we deal with those? Because this is a radical change, kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be people saying, hold on, no, 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 no. We got to slow down. We got to go a different direction.
Yeah.
And I think what we sometimes forget about in Canada, because we're kind of on this island of North America, but the rest of the world is moving, whether we kind of adopt things or not.
We,
And
yeah, exactly. We are
capital,
like connected vessels. Like we are in the connected vessels universe. Like it's the water line is gonna rise regardless
yeah.
of where you're at. We are connected.
Well, the difference though is in the water it raises all ships. In this case, we may not rise with those ships if we don't maybe build the ship. So I think that um, in this world where everyone's advancing, everyone's adopting AI, everyone's adopting with maybe it's cryptocurrencies,
Yeah.
web, like everything is changing so rapidly, and if we don't keep up, then capital and talent are going to go to those places where they can,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's pursue their dreams, find their purpose, get the best return. Um, those are that's kind of what I wonder is can Canada keep up? We're gonna have to shake off a little bit, I think, of this risk aversion.
Yeah.
Um, but the great thing is that like Canada, where we do that, is actually a super exciting place because we can actually have even more abundance than we have right now.
Yeah.
And I think that will help with the quality of life, and I think it will also help with equality across income. It's a pretty exciting promised land.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, this is fantastic. I want to also, for the record, congratulate you and thank you for building this business right here in the prairies. You are headquartered in Alberta, in Calgary, Neo Financial. And I 100% agree with you. The opportunity and the moment is now. We now we have the resources, both natural and human. We have a stability. We have even geographical location that is superbly centered. And the opportunity for Canada and for the prairies, I think, is now. And thank you for sort of sharing that with us and sharing your experiences with me today. I know you have to drop, that we are coming to the time. So thank you very much again, Jeff. It was lovely to see you and to hear your story, and I
Mhm.
look forward to staying connected and seeing where Neo goes next.
Well, thanks for having me on, Dalibor, and also, I mean, thank you for everything that you do as well. And I know that you're based out of Alberta, and you spent a long career helping a lot of companies succeed. And so it's a sincere pleasure chatting with you and also really excited to see some of the work that you're doing as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeff. Have yourself a lovely Monday. And for the audience, thank you very much. See you soon. Bye bye.